All right.
All right. So we're going to hit record. Doesn't mean we're live. Of course, explained that to you earlier.
Oh my God, we're live.
Don't panic. Don't panic.
Yeah. So, Dmitri, how are you?
Doing pretty good. Looking forward to a new year. How about you guys?
Yes.
I am.
Hopefully we're going to get some live music coming up this year. Bands getting back together, rehearsing, working on new shit, getting out there, booking recording studios. I think all that's going to happen this year.
Man, that would be nice. I'd love for that to start happening.
Totally.
Waiting for the vaccine to roll out. I am. I think that's going to help.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm ready to get one. Or two.
Yep, my wife just got one.
How did
really?
She?
Yeah, I'm like on the last, end of the list, basically. So who knows when that's going to be?
Right. Would all doom metal artists please report?
Yeah. Musician, end of the list. Right. But as long as people are getting it, that's what counts.
Yeah. I'm just glad it's there. It's like a real thing.
Yeah, pretty quickly, too. I mean, it all came around pretty quickly. Yeah, I think a lot of that's just like the way that the vaccine's being made now, or like these RNA vaccines, or mRNA vaccines.
Different approach.
Yeah, it is a different approach to it. And I'm hoping it works. Something's got to give.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to get out there.
I think everybody's so tired.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys released a goddamn album during all this.
You guys being, we should probably clarify that.
Probably should. We probably should introduce who we're talking to. We're bad about that. We are talking to Dmitri Mavra. Do I have your last name right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Of Dungeon Weed. We were supposed to have Chris on, Chris McGrew, drummer for Griddle and other acts. And he's how I heard about your group. The funny thing is, actually, I got a message from like 4 different people around the country when that record dropped. And they're like, check this out, man. And I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, I fucking really dig it. And then Chris sent it to me and he was like, check this out, man. And I was like, yeah, it's like, that's the 3rd time I've got it. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry if I sent you this record like 3 times. He's like, no, you didn't. I was like,
it's
that's funny.
It's like other people I know are sending it to me left and right. So checked it out. But how did you guys get together to create this thing?
Well, I moved out here being the Bay Area in the early 90s with a band I'd been playing with. We all moved out here from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and kind of set up camp here, and we're playing around. And that's where I met Chris. He was kind of in the same boat. He was a drummer playing in a bunch of bands. And so we just kind of ended up being in the same circle for years, kept touch over the years. And then at some point I started up this band called Skunk. That was in 2013 or 14. And we were just messing around, writing songs, needed a practice space. And I talked to Chris. It turned out he had space available in his, practice room that he sublets out. Mm-hmm. So we joined in that, and kind of got back on the same page with Chris about rock music and stuff. I hadn't seen him for a while, so kind of reconnected. And he helped us make our album for that band, Double Blind. And he engineered the drums for that. We actually recorded it in our practice space with Chris, like engineering the drums. He had this whole Pro Tools setup built into the practice space. So we go down there like 8 a.m. There's like an opera singer practicing next door, and recorded all the drum tracks for this whole album like in one day. It was like five of us in the room, and Chris crammed in there trying to work the Pro Tools.
Wow.
So then we did a year later, we did another Skunk album, and that one we actually recorded over at Hyde Street, where Chris is a partner and engineer at Wally's Hideout.
Yeah.
It's a very cool studio. One of the 3 Hyde Streets.
Been there.
Yeah. Hyde Street is an old studio, and it's got 3 studios within it of, descending sizes. And so the 3rd one, Studio C, is this really nice small studio, and that's what Chris is working with. And so we tracked the drums there, and it has a super cool drum room, or just live room. Herbie Hancock recorded there in the early 70s and some legendary stuff,
Yeah.
So we did that. And again, Chris engineered that one. And so that was fun. So yeah, I don't know. We just kind of had been hooking up on that stuff. And then when the pandemic hit, Chris emailed me, I think in May, and he said, "Hey, I'm working on setting up the studio to, record remotely with people. I got plenty of time, so send me some riffs."
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, okay. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I realized I had this entire album that I'd already written in 2018.
Oh, wow.
I'd written the whole thing. I had all the song titles, all the songs, basically, just kind of like demos of the songs.
Right.
And so I was like, well, as a matter of fact, I do have some riffs. He's like, all right, cool. Send it over, So we just started working on these songs. The album had been written, but then we started doing it for real. That was in like June, I guess.
So when you're recording in a place like Hyde, are you the kind of person that can feel the energy that was there? Like prior, like when you talk about Herbie Hancock and other artists recording there?
Yeah, well, when we did the one Skunk album there, I could definitely feel it,
Right. It's
the
not
design
the same when you're doing it remotely, I'm guessing.
Right.
Yeah. But the design of that Studio C, which they now call Wally's Hideout, is really cool. It looks kind of has this 70s vibe to it. Just a cool sounding room. And so, yeah, you can feel like you're not just in some modern studio some guy built in his basement with Pro Tools and stuff.
Right.
This is like a real legendary place. So, yeah, I didn't get to experience that, though, with Dungeon Weed since I was sitting here in this exact chair the whole time. So,
Right.
Yeah. Soon, man. Soon.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that translates, because to me, just like listening to the record it's a soundscape. It's one of those things that just, it starts and you just have to listen to the whole thing all the way through.
Yeah.
You can't just like select a track.
Uh-huh.
So, and I can imagine it, and even like lyrical content and everything else like that going into parts of your mind and going into the mind. And, do you think that was a big part of the, just the subject matter too, was just that you were kind of doing this all from the mind and not from the studio, if that makes any sense?
Well, I don't know. Like I said, I wrote it, in 2018.
Before that.
Yeah. But I remember at that time, it was like this time of year, it was kind of in the winter and I had bronchitis or something. So I just had like been in a foul mood and not getting to go out and play music. And I think that's when I wrote it.
Oh.
Just kind of like screwing around, like in a week or something. I just wrote all these songs. Yeah, I don't know. The lyrics, I don't know where that came from. It was just something I kind of improvised almost.
Yeah.
Seemed like you had fun doing it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because normally I don't play in that tuning. If all the Doom stuff is in drop D tuning or open tunings of different kinds. And, I'm used to doing that because I play other instruments where you use those sorts of tunings. But for rock music, I had only experimented with that a couple times with Skunk, mostly stuck to standard tuning. So I think that when I recorded the album, I was just like, oh, I'm going to mess around with that tuning and just start jamming and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's fun. That sounds like a song. I was like, oh yeah, here's another one. Oh yeah. Now, once you get going, then it's hard to stop.
Yeah.
There's almost something like, and I don't know how to describe it. Maybe John, you can come up with a better, but almost just strangely enchanting about some of it for me. I don't know, just kind of the way it pulls you in. You're kind of transported. At least that's my feel when I start listening, just from the beginning.
I think, the way I'd kind of describe it, I guess, would be that it's thematic without being trite,
Yeah.
It's thematic without being pigeonholed, That's what I really liked about the record. And, I really dig it. And it's definitely, when you hear it, it's within your wheelhouse. You can tell that, but you got a weird wheelhouse, man. Like, you've done like a banjo record, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And we're not above that. We're from the Ozarks.
Absolutely not. No.
We love banjo.
When after I came out here with my band in the 90s, I did that for a few years, and it kind of ran its course, and I got really sick of it. And I was kind of like, I didn't want anything to do with, playing in rock bands anymore. I just kind of burned out on it.
Right.
And at that time I got a new job, and this guy there kind of turned me on to what they call old time music, which is kind of like pre-bluegrass mountain music, on the fiddle, banjo, mandolin, guitar, so forth. And I kind of delved into that and like went down a like 10-year rabbit hole, basically, where I learned to play the fiddle and the banjo, and I'd go back to like West Virginia and bum around with these like 90-year-old fiddle dudes, and
wow,
just got really into it. Started a string band, taught my wife how to play banjo. We still play square dances, not now because of the pandemic, but
right.
We played hundreds of square dances together.
That's awesome.
So
I bet you ran into some interesting characters.
Oh yeah. I mean, once you start bumming around Appalachia, I mean, of course.
Right. I'm from Southern Missouri, and John lived there for a long time, so it's not so far off. They're both hillbillies, so I can imagine.
Yeah, I think living in Missouri, and if you claim to know anything about music or like music at all, you have to have a kind of bluegrass badge. You know,
there's tons of fiddle players from Missouri. Yeah, it's a big fiddle area. So I did that all through my late 20s and 30s, and during that time I started getting into like other kinds of old music as well, and I started studying this Greek music that's called Rebetica, and it's played on the Greek bouzouki, and it's something I just picked up from listening to these old 78s and whatnot.
So what is a bouzouki?
Well, the bouzouki is it's kind of like a guitar-sized instrument that has 3 sets of 2 strings. So kind of in the same way a mandolin does,
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and it's played open, but this kind of music started in the 20s or 30s. And it's, like I said, it's called Rebetica. And it was these like kind of gangsters would get together in the slum areas of Athens, and like they'd hang out in these underground hashish dens, or just like gangsters and thieves and prostitutes. And it was just like the underworld scene of that time in Athens. And these guys would play this kind of music, and it was all about smoking hash and getting busted by the cops, and just all this stuff. And it's very cool music. It's in like a weird time signature, and they use these like kind of trippy scales and stuff. So I learned to play that and started a band playing that out here in Oakland. And, I think we did that for about 15 years. We haven't played in the last year or two, but
So was it like a niche thing? I mean, did people just like get it or not get it, or just
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's out here, there's a very diverse music scene, and there's a tons of people that are into like various kinds of Balkan music,
right?
Whether it's Turkish music or Bulgarian music or, Arabic music. I mean, all that kind of stuff. There's,
I would think in a big enough city, you could find like enough people to like listen to, Baroque vampire parties and shit like that. But was it a thing you think you were transcending?
I don't think we were just trying to kind of recreate
it,
pay tribute to the masters, and just, it's so fun to play the music. But so I was just gonna say that those scales that I learned from doing that are a huge part of what I think people are identifying with in Dungeon Weed when they say things like it's hypnotic. It's like I'm applying some of those ideas from that Greek music to the kind of doom sound,
Wow, that's crazy.
Okay. Yeah, hypnotic's maybe a little bit better term than.
Yeah, that's insane. But I mean, were you like always sort of a music historian, or just is that something you kind of fell into?
I was always kind of like, like most people, kind of a nerd when it comes to music. Like I loved Rush when I was in middle school, and then in high school I got totally into punk rock, and saw the last Black Flag show ever, and saw the Butthole Surfers like 20 times. But when I got into this old music, that's when I kind of became a little more conscious of like, oh yeah, you can be like a historian, or you can just like study these different things.
Right.
And it's out there, and there's music from all over the world that's super cool, and so I did a lot of that. I've collected all these old 78s, and I've put out a few reissue projects of just music from different countries like Ethiopia or Southeast Asia, stuff like that.
Wow, that's interesting. But I mean, for a lot of American kids, well, I'd say at least for a lot of Midwestern kids, like old music to us would be like, Porter Wagner or Roger Miller or Elvis's work. Like, I don't think I would have ever gotten into like ancient Greek gangster music about hash.
Well, actually, it's only
like,
a 2-step process because first you're like, well, 3 steps. First you get into like the Rolling Stones. Then you learn like who Robert Johnson is, right?
Right.
So you buy the collection of that, and those are all 78s from that exact same era, and you're like, oh, wow. So there's, music from that era. What other music was on 78s from that era? And boom, next thing you know, there's like Irish music, Italian music, Greek music, Chinese music. I mean, it's all turns out to be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to ask what your heritage is then, if that had anything to do with it.
Nothing. Yeah. Just Irish, German, white, suburban, American.
Same. Yep. White dude.
Yep. We're all white dudes.
Well, that's why I like to try to bring a little ethnic flavor into the, doom scene and spice it up with some stuff. I don't think, I haven't heard anyone who's reviewed it or commented on it pick up on the fact that it's using these exotic scales at all.
Yeah.
Except for the only person is the guy who mastered it, Miles Boysen, who's kind of a well-known musician around Oakland, the Bay Area. He's like, are you playing some of that Rebettica stuff in here? I said, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I'm not familiar. But, it's not surprising. I mean, we are the flower.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, our exposure is pretty limited here. And really, until internet really became a thing, it was really hard to get exposed to a lot of stuff in this part of the country.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it was like when I was growing up, too, in Michigan. I mean, I was graduated high school in 86. So, in the 80s, if you wanted to learn about a band, how do you do it? There's no... You just ask your friends.
And you take a gamble.
But sometimes. Like, you don't, some of these, a lot of bands like Scratch Acid or something, you're like, wow, where do you learn about them? They're not in People magazine or anything.
Yeah. And I think there's something interesting too about that Midwestern or Northern Midwestern, well, all through the Midwest, but formulating these bands out of just these amalgamations of different backgrounds and didn't have a lot of access to anything else to be influenced by. So where'd you grow up? You say Michigan around, what was it? Ann Arbor? Is that what I read?
Yeah, just outside of Ann Arbor.
Yeah. How was that?
That was cool. I mean, at first, it was shit just being in this Republican suburb. And, I was happy listening to Rush and stuff. But by high school, I was just looking for something else. And a friend of mine was a kid I knew from like, middle school or whatever. I was like, hey man, I heard you're into punk rock, tell me about it. Next thing I know, a year later, we're like skateboarding all around, like listening to Black Flag and stuff. So, so that like totally opened my ears to a lot of things, it's like, whoa, politics. I was like, I never heard anyone, say some of the shit they're saying on these records. And I was like, I like it.
Yeah, they had something to say if you were really listening.
Yeah. So that for me, that was like a major life changer, just finding this totally outsider music. 1983, I mean, that was pretty early still in the punk movement, I'd say.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I probably did get turned on to a lot of punk rock until about 87. Probably
mid-80s.
87, somewhere around there.
Yeah, we used to go down to this place in Detroit called the Greystone, which was like kind of a VFW hall type place, but, had a bar in it. And it was just, in a pretty rough neighborhood, but whatever. We just go down there, you see 3 bands, Touch and Go Records was right near there. So a lot of the Touch and Go bands came through, like Butthole Surfers, Killdozer, Scratch Acid, stuff like that, which I really liked, because the hardcore stuff is great, but, it's a little formulaic. And so as soon as I started seeing these trippier bands, I really totally got into that. Yeah. Scratch Acid, I saw them like 2 or 3 times at the Greystone and totally insane, man. So good.
So living up in Michigan, I'm wondering, did you get like a little more Canadian exposure than maybe we do here?
No, but mostly I would go down to Ann Arbor, after I got into the punk stuff. My friends and I would go down there and like tool around on our skateboards and meet up with the other skate punks there. And, that was a pretty hip place because it was kind of like a little bit like, it's a college town, former hippie town. Just lots of, they had like the alternative high school there, where all the punk rockers went. And, there was places where we could play shows. I didn't play then, but my friends were in a band. So it was a pretty cool place to be able to go, 15 minutes away. We'd be in this hip little college town with punk rockers. Oh, so that was good. Yeah. And they had a killer record store there too, man. School Kids Records was a pretty legendary spot, I guess. And I bought so many things there for the first time, The Residents, Captain Beefheart, just stuff like that. I'd go down there and they'd have it like, out front, like with recommendations. I'd be like, all right, I'll check it out. Just get all this crazy stuff.
But somehow you didn't make any money like professionally skateboarding. You had to get to San Francisco somehow.
Yeah, no. Once I got into college, I went to college in Ann Arbor as well. So
yeah,
I got into music is what happened is I learned how to play guitar when I was a freshman and my roommate was in the music school. And I would just kind of look in books. Then he would tell me what it meant. And then 6 months later, we had a band going. So no more skateboarding after that.
When did Slow Phase come in? Is that Slow Phase or is that?
Oh, no. Slow Phase is my most recent band. Yeah.
Okay. So who was that?
That was a band that was called the Psychedelic Lounge Cats.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, so our kind of gimmick was that we were like kind of like a Holiday Inn band, that you might see wearing like velvet tuxedos or whatever.
Right.
But then in the middle of this like bossa nova or something, we just start going into these psychedelic jams. But
that still sounds like a good time.
It was good. Plus we did like covers of we did like weird 70s covers. We did a little bit of the Love Boat theme, segued into like some incidental music we learned from an episode of Chips. So it was like kind of pretty ironic, a lot of irony, but it was cool. There was had all kinds of music involved in it and
kind of yacht rock, Bee Gees-esque, but
had some of that. But then it also had this like Grateful Dead, LSD, Butthole Surfers aspect that people loved, and we had like a light show, and so it was a big event when we would play because it was kind of like a little happening.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was just thinking about kind of that era and how that was done a lot, and making fun of the the Jungle Room type velour suit.
Yeah.
Thing that went on in popular culture, but it's like I used to just hate like disco groups and shit like that. But as I get older, man, I like that shit a lot more. I really do. I sat down and watched a 2-hour documentary on the Bee Gees the other day.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Did you see that? The one
I did. Yeah, that was good.
What'd you think? You thought it was good?
Yeah. We embraced. They kind of talk about in the film how they imply the Bee Gees were doing this kind of like higher level stuff, which I agree. And then, kind of got really schlocky with like the K-Tel disco albums and stuff.
Yeah.
But like with the Psychedelic Lounge Cats, we would like embrace the K-Tel stuff. And we would sometimes learn like exact arrangements from those records, pretty cheesy stuff like that, try to turn it around and make it cool.
Sure. I think they were definitely all consummate musicians. I think they were doing the best.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The harmonies were incredible, everything else like that. But, to hear like Maury Gibb just saying, she's like, we transcended so many eras and generations. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Pump your brakes a little bit there.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting in that.
Still good. Yeah.
In that movie, they kind of call out the whole disco sucks movement. As really like, just kind of a thinly veiled, racism and homophobic.
And I didn't buy that. And here's a couple reasons. Nobody said they hated Jimi Hendrix. Nobody said they hated Thin Lizzy. And Queen kept topping the charts.
Yeah, everybody thought Queen was black.
But beyond that, it's like, okay, here you have members of the band who are not necessarily heterosexual. Here you have bands who are of different races and things like that. It's not necessarily the race or the people. It is the music. People wanted things, I think, that just rocked more.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of the artificialness of the disco, especially the imitation disco.
Sure.
But on the other hand, aside from the Bee Gees, almost every other top disco artist was black. Donna
Right.
Summers,
Right.
so on. So I think, when you look at those people who did it, they did have a racial motive. That guy they mention in the film, I forget what his name is now, who spearheaded that.
The DJ from the Loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, Disco Sex Night. And I mean, I can definitely see there could be that element there. But I just don't, I couldn't equivocate the fact that if you hated disco, you were a racist.
No, I don't think it's that. It's not quite so clear as that.
Yeah.
I kind of think with anything new comes along and it kind of takes over for a little bit and everybody starts trying to mimic it, then it turns to shit. It turns into Pearl Jam and everybody's trying to be Eddie Vedder, and then we've got 7 Mary 3 out there.
Right. There are genuine, and then there are copycats.
And then when you get all the copycat, they're just never going to be as good, and it brings down the quality.
Well, and it's kind of an indictment, and I thought in a good way, too, they covered it in the film, that it's sort of an indictment of society more than it is of the music. Just people not getting it, and people marketing lunchboxes, and people, marketing all these things that had nothing to do with the music whatsoever. They were just like, do you like disco? Try our disco flavored cereal. I was like,
right.
What does that even mean? What does it taste like? We'll tell you what it fucking tastes like. Just eat it. It's $5. Just buy it.
Part of what we were doing with that college band was that we were saying, like, yes, like the imitation stuff is so bad, but it's good in its own way. Like even the cheesiest stuff can be good because it's all just music, and you can just really, if you want to like it and want to see things about it that you like, you can. And so we would mash up those things like the disco stuff, put it in with these like psychedelic parts, and people would love it. They totally dig it. It was a new way of looking at it, I guess. I still think of it that way. When I listen to, like, when you look at the doom scene, for example, I mean, there's as many imitators in the doom scene as there was in the disco scene.
Oh, absolutely.
And they, there's just as many cliches and whatnot, but it's fun to love them more than it is to hate them, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same process though. You have to realize that there's stereotypes about the music and be able to have fun with that.
Yeah. Now that you say that, it's really interesting. So just like every genre in my head is like bang, 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 these flashes of bands, like 80s metal or hair metal, or anything else. Just or
the imitation grunge bands,
Yeah, imitation grunge, imitation rap, imitation anything. Jeez.
But to a kid now, looking back at the imitation grunge stuff, it's going to have a totally different vibe, and they might love it. Be like, oh,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And, I think sometimes, too, some of those bands just really got cornered, and it wasn't necessarily that they were trying to imitate something. We talked about this before with the guys from Truck Stop Love out of Kansas, because, they were a grungy sounding band. They weren't trying to be Nirvana. They lived in Kansas, for Christ's sakes. They didn't know who Nirvana was. They were just making this...
they didn't know who Nirvana was before they started sounding the way they sounded.
So it's like, but all these producers, everybody else, record executives was looking for the band that sounded like this, so they got pulled to the front. I mean, Seattle is like another prime example of that, where you've got, all sorts of different music genres came out of Seattle. But what are we stuck with as defining a whole area of the country?
Right.
Yeah, grunge music, which isn't bad. I like a lot of grunge music, but shit, there's a lot of great funk that comes out of there. There's a lot of great soul and jazz that comes out of there.
Yeah, for sure.
And for its geography is a weird place for like soul and funk to come out of, but it does.
Yeah.
And it does in heaps. So you move on to San Francisco at that point. Right.
Yeah, we just played out here. It was a pretty thriving scene back then. That's when I met Chris. He was in the Jazz Weasels, which were this kind of instrumental jazz funk band that were great. A lot of great musicians in that.
Right on.
And just started hanging. I think we had a mutual friend from college or something, so we just kind of hooked up and kind of got in their scene. But there was tons of bands around here then. So many places to play. Played all the time. There was this place that had 3 stages, so you could be on the big stage, the medium stage, or the upstairs small stage. And they'd have 6 bands a night or something. I mean, there was just, music was all over the place. It was great. I did that for a while, and, it just wasn't the irony stuff that we were doing. Like I was saying, the disco stuff and whatever. I just kind of, at some point it's a dead end. And I was just like, you guys, I got to quit playing this,
Yeah.
And that's when that's when I met the guy who turned me on to this old time music. And then for the next, 15 years, I actually gave away my electric guitar to my friend who was in the band. It was a nice Strat. And that was like in 96. And I didn't have even touch another electric guitar until probably 2013.
Wow.
So my kid at the time was like in 5th grade, and he started playing our housemate's little drum set. And I was like, wow, that sounds really good. If you can do a regular rock beat for 1 minute, I'll show you how to do it. If you can do it for a whole minute, I'll give you $5. So, I'll give you a month to work on it. But like after 2 days, he could do it, because it's not that hard.
Right.
But anyway, then I was like, all right, I got to get a guitar. Let's go to Guitar Center. I just went and bought a new guitar, and I was like, all right, we're going to play Iron Man. Let's go.
Right.
Nice.
So yeah, then he got kind of burned out on it. Of course, he's like, Dad, I just want to play video games. It's like, okay,
Man,
fine.
I struggle with that with my kid all the time.
Yeah.
It's waves with him. He'll get into playing and he plays drums. And he'll get into it for a little while, and then he'll, I don't want to do this anymore. And then he'll want to do it again, and then he doesn't want to do it anymore.
I struggle with myself with that all the time. Have you seen these fucking video games? They're amazing.
Yeah, but he's still wanting to just play Minecraft, which he's been playing.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Since he was 5.
I mean, my kid still does that when they're 15.
Yeah.
He and his friends all get on there. And I was never much of a video game guy at all. Even in high school, we'd go down to the arcade and play Centipede and stuff, but I would just get bored, man. I'm a person that wants to like create shit, it's like
things, yeah.
I just can't sit still. Like I can't really even watch movies anymore. I'm just too agitated. I'm like, I could be doing something else right now,
Good for you.
Although I did, this week we watched 2 movies, so I feel like I made a little progress.
Oh, what'd you watch?
We watched the Bee Gees movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ma Rainey.
Oh, yeah.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is
was good.
Really good. Highly recommended.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, that was killer.
Great dialogue in that. Just banging all the way through. Kept you hooked. That was a good one.
So yeah, you think about that. She was from the 1922 is from her first recording. And I think that movie was probably set in like 25 or something.
Yeah, it's early.
I mean, that's even earlier than this Greek music I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So that's pretty old music right there.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm totally going to have to check out that stuff.
Yeah, it's a good movie. What's it on? Is it on, was it on Amazon or something? Or Netflix?
I can't remember.
One of our many sponsors.
Yeah.
Can't wait to
just
get
check
that
it out.
check.
Already.
Yeah, of course, the whole time I was watching that, I was like appreciating everything about it, but wishing that it was more about the music.
Right.
Like,
right.
forget about that stuff, you guys. Let's work through that tune again. Come on, give it another run. Why not?
Right. And I think a lot of it too is like the Chadwick Boseman trying to get out that it was his last thing that they're putting out there. So can't blame him for that,
I'm going to die, you guys.
Yeah, and he was a great performer. He did a great performance in it. It was excellent. See, that's the thing about movies, like being impatient about movies is I appreciate a lot of films as an art form and art in itself, much like music. So I can get distracted by movies really easily. Like not TV, just like TV shows. Yeah. That doesn't turn me on, but movies do.
I started out as a filmmaker in my late 20s. I studied experimental film at University of Michigan with this guy who was an acolyte to Stan Brakhage, like the famous experimental guy from the 60s. So when I came out here, I ended up getting a job, working in the film industry, doing graphics, like animated graphics. And so I was totally in the film scene. I made like some documentaries and stuff and was, totally absorbed in film. But then as soon as streaming came out, I was just like, not interested, That was all before streaming when you had to see movies in the theater.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, to me, streaming, I just don't enjoy that experience. You're just sitting there looking at it on your laptop or on your whatever, your flat screen.
Yeah. It's everything's always a little better if you have to work a little harder for it.
Totally.
I think that's true. I think that's definitely
that's true. I get more inspired seeing a movie at a theater for some reason than I do watching it at home most of the time.
Sure.
I mean, when I was in college, if you wanted to you're making a film and you wanted to layer together 2 streams of 2 images, you would shoot each one separately, set them up on individual projectors, and then project them onto the same surface and film that surface.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now I could do that on the computer, of course, in just 3 seconds. Yeah. But to do that, it was like you really had to work at it, and it looked cool as hell. And yeah.
So what about your experience in fine art then? Talking about design and things like that. And I guess that leads me around to just thinking about the artwork for the album, which I think is fucking great.
Yeah, thank you.
I talked about this earlier. I ordered the CD and poster combo. There's a blacklight poster comes out for it. Tell us a little bit just about the artwork.
Well, I had stumbled on this artist from Oakland named Skinner. I don't know if you know this guy. He's done a couple Mastodon albums, and his stuff is so cool looking. It's basically like psychedelic horror art.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, I was like, oh man, this guy's cool. And I checked out. I was like, holy shit, he lives like a mile away from me. Not even, probably like a quarter of a mile.
Huh.
So I was like, oh, that's cool. That's an advantage of living in Oakland, right? There's all kinds of cool stuff happening. So anyway, I got into just checking out his style and stuff, and learned he was working mostly with like an ink brush. So I had gone to art school. I have a degree in fine art.
Oh, cool.
And mostly in art school, I did like photography and filmmaking, like I said.
Uh-huh.
But, I could draw. I could always draw comic books and stuff. So anyway, I started getting back into that. I was going to try to learn this kind of brush technique that this guy uses. And so I was just fucking around with it. And really, that was one of the first drawings I made was that skull face guy. And then a bunch of other
on the cover with the brain.
Yeah, the guy on the cover, but it was just black and white, just line art. And so I just drew I had probably like 20 or 30 things like that I drew in a month or so, just trying to learn how to use the brush, really.
Right.
And so I scanned in a few of the best ones, and then I was messing around with it, and then I had, like I said, I made up this dungeon weed thing when I was sick a couple years ago, and then I was like, oh, I need to make up an fake album cover for it. This is all just in my imagination. I really didn't intend to do any of this. It was just fucking around.
Right.
But that's how I roll, So I'm like, next thing you know, I've got the whole album cover design. I've got the track list. I've got the whole demos and everything. And then I put it away for a year and a half without ever even thinking about it. So really, that's where the artwork comes from. I was just experimenting with the brush, kind of working in the, inspired by this guy Skinner. Not trying to copy his style, but just, inspired to take up that tool and see what kind of weird D&D monstrosities I could create myself.
Speaking of which, you keep reassuring me this is going to happen, but a role-playing campaign based off of the album or like inspired by the album, correct?
Yeah, I hope so. I'm not sure, I'm not going to guarantee it, but basically, this guy came to me right after the album came out, and it started getting a little action and people paying attention. And he's like, man, I love it. It's like a D&D adventure waiting to happen. I have my own little game company. How about if we work out a module, a D&D module? So basically a pre-built adventure based on the album.
Great idea.
So I was like, hell yeah,
idea.
dude. Because that's kind of the idea of the album is like this trippy little campaign.
Right. Chris told me about it. I'm like, I'm buying that. It's the moment.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So he hired like a writer to work on it, and I didn't like what he came up with because it had nothing to do with anything in the album. So, and then he couldn't find anyone else. So he kind of said, all right, well, it was worth a try, thanks anyway. So then I just posted on Facebook, like, hey, anyone else want to take a stab, get a hold of me. And I got like 10 people. We're like, I'm a game designer. I've had 3 games I did or 3 modules. Anyway, so this first guy that contacted me actually seemed totally appropriate and cool. So I just said, let's do it. We talked back and forth. So he's working on that now.
Cool.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's in progress. I need to check in and hopefully it's still happening.
And I mean,
but
I'm not like I played D&D a lot, like when I was in high school, or
yeah, same here.
Haven't in a while. I've got a couple friends who still do, just like everybody does. But I would, I'd crack out the dice to play that.
Well, you know what's going to be cool. I think that got me kind of stoked is I hadn't played D&D since the early 80s.
Yeah,
I started in the mid 70s.
I've completely forgotten how to play at this point.
Yeah.
Right. So, but my kid is really into it. Like I said, he's 15. And so when the pandemic first started, we were playing and we had a game going for a while. And so then I had to learn all the new rules and stuff, which was fine.
Right.
So fast forward to this guy coming in, the second guy to work on the project. He said, well, I sort of see this as like an old school thing. I was like, totally. He's like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people out there that like to play by the old rules. Because the old rules are more like loose and more imagination forward, whereas the newer rules have everything is fucking spelled out. It's like, what's a mind flare? And then it gives you this whole like 20-page detail of like their history. Like, guys, you don't need that. You get to make that up yourself. That's the whole fucking point.
Yeah, it's not the army. We're trying to have fun and eat pretzels.
Yeah, and just like it's like you get to make up what mind flayers are. Do they come from a different planet, or are they like come out of zombies, or what? I don't know.
Right.
But it's like they don't need to tell you all the backstory of everything. So anyway, so this guy is going to work with that in mind, trying to make it adhere to the old school original rules, I guess. And hopefully that'll work.
Man, I'm looking forward to it. I just like to have it to put it up my shelf, honestly, and just like. Because it just sets the artwork and the concept and the record itself too, just with like the sound. So, dancing about architecture and all that, but let's talk a little bit about the record and like gear and sound. Because I'm looking at all my shit here by my amplifier and I want to imitate some of it. So,
well, I'm totally lo-fi on my end. I just use I have a Scarlett Focusrite digital interface, which is pretty affordable, and it has 4 microphone inputs. And I use that, and I just plug my SM58 into that and stick that in front of my guitar amp and record right into my Mac,
okay.
That's the whole process. I use Reaper as my editing software, which is really cool. Pro Tools alternative. It's basically free to use. I mean, it's like a $50 license, or you can just have it on demo mode perpetually.
Wow.
It's great, and it's easy to use and super flexible and can do everything I've needed to do. I recorded and mixed both Skunk albums and the Slow Phase album and the Dungeon Weed album.
How much of the effects are done like in post mix, or just like in mix? Yeah, on the guitar.
On the guitar, you mean?
Yeah.
Or just in general? I have 2 different setups. I have a Marshall that I used to use when we would play live, and that's like a 4x10 cabinet, with a JCM 800. So that's pretty potent. So I also use this smaller 30-watt orange amp through a smaller cabinet, when I don't need to get as loud. So I kind of went back and forth between those 2. I had a couple different fuzz pedals I used in coordination with the fuzz on the gain on the amp. I used a phaser and a wah pedal. Then as far as post effects, I used some more phaser and some delay, probably. I didn't have a pedal delay, so I used it digitally. So yeah, pretty straightforward, really. The bass I just plugged directly into GarageBand. I plugged right into the Focusrite and then into the GarageBand and just found a preset and cranked up all the distortion and level and gain on it till I got a sound I liked and just use that.
That's a good lesson for people, though. They go out and they spend so much money and think, I've got to have the best of this or the best of that.
No.
And really, you don't.
Well, it depends, too. I mean, to be fair, it's like I was going for a nasty, grungy sound. If I was trying to make like funk music or something, it might be better to take a different approach. But, for the sludge I was going for, I didn't really, I wanted it to have some artifacts and stuff. I just left the amp cranked up so high that it was just like buzzing like crazy, and that's running through some of the songs. I just wanted to feel like it was super electrified,
Right.
like, oh shit, man, turn that thing off. It's going to blow up. What are you doing? It's just like, zzz.
How
that's kind
much
of
are
an
you worried about
undercurrent.
that like being recreatable though? If you want to go do this show live,
Oh, I don't know. I
Really?
never even considered doing it, and I haven't even yet
Right.
until
When you
you
I'm
made
just
it,
said
sorry.
it
that.
wasn't even
I
a
didn't mean to
thought.
fuck up your
Yeah.
life.
I bet you could
Damn,
do it.
man. Oh yeah, I mean, I could do it. I'd have to get
Yeah.
someone to play bass
Because you're just so people know you're layering
but,
all this. I mean, it's the album doesn't sound like two guys.
Yeah.
It's sounds like many more, but they're all you and Chris, correct? I mean, pretty much.
Yeah. There's a bunch of synth tracks on there. There's guitar and bass and synth, and I think that's all I put on there. But I distorted a lot of things. There's a lot of just like feedback and stuff like that. That's kind of used as another instrument almost.
Well, we know a few Bay Area cats. We don't live there at all, but we know some. Because I'd like to see this album live. Man, I really would.
Yeah, it would be interesting to do it. I mean, I'm sure we could do it, but it's like now it's just like my main band that I play with is Slow Phase, and we haven't even, we've played once since February, I think. So it's just like, it's hard to get anything together. That's why I'm doing this stuff. Since September, I've written 3 sides of the next Dungeon Weed album. Chris and I started.
Yeah. A lot of artists we've talked to, like the pandemic actually kind of brought out, oh yeah, I've been sitting on this thing. I forgot about it. Maybe it's the time to see what, and it's crazy how often it's really good shit.
That
people have been sitting on.
Yeah. I have a whole nother, it's funny because when I went back and looked at this stuff, I also found I had a second album that I did right after that. And the band is called Psionic Blast, also a D&D sounding theme. But this is like, I don't even remember recording this stuff. Like I said, it was 2 years ago. And this is like this insane punk rock, free jazz stuff. And it's a whole album again of that. And I haven't tried to do anything with that either, but maybe I can get Chris on that one too.
Online at all or anything? Or
no, like I said, it's just like the demos I made, from 2 years ago, but it was right at the same time as I made the Dungeon Weed stuff.
So what do you think? I mean, if you just got the news, say breaking text in your phone tomorrow, pandemic over, everything fine, back to 2018 levels, just drink the little potion. I'm not saying anything about the the vaccine or anything. Just, let's say if that were the case, the magic mushrooms eaten, everything's fine. We all go back to normal. What would be your first plan for like performance or anything else?
Me?
Or what you'd want to get out there and do?
Well, I'm dying to get back together with my guys in Slow Phase. We have a great time playing. I mean, I could just play with them. I don't even care if we make albums because they're so much fun to play with. The drummer is this guy, Richard Stuverud, who plays with, he's been in a ton of bands. He's from Seattle. He's played on Jeff Ahmed's solo albums. He's the Pearl Jam's bass player. And he played in the Fastbacks, a famous punk band from up there, and just all these bands. And he's incredible, man. We just jam, So he's our Slow Phase drummer. And so I just want to get back on that, man. I've got a million ideas I want to play live with him and our bass player Anthony, and just
I think that's that's kind of the majority, or that's the consensus we hear. It's just like I never hear from anybody who's like a real musician who's just like, I need to get back and make money. That's part of it. I understand. I mean, you have to do that, but they're all just like, I want to be with my friends. I want to play music with my friends. We hear that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I only lose music at money, so that's not a big deal for me. I'm making more money on music now than I ever did by not playing. But for me, it's just I got a million ideas stored up that I want to play, and also just the act of playing. It's like people who go running, they love to lose weight, but they really actually love the act of running, and that's the same way I am with music. It's like I love making albums, I love making Dungeon Weed recordings and stuff, but my main interest is to be with other musicians and actually playing live and reacting to each other and stuff.
I totally get it. I don't think I would enjoy doing the podcast nearly as much if it wasn't for that asshole John.
Yeah. On that note,
I can reciprocate anytime.
meh. No, but I mean, no, honestly, yeah, that's a great note to end it on. And we don't want to keep you all night, Dmitri. Man, it's been a good time. I had a blast talking to you, man. Getting to know you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Looking forward to
That's
stuff coming and
Having
yeah.
more and hearing more. I need to
Yeah,
get
you
some
need to
shit.
get some Dungeon Weed shit. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
Yes.
need.
lay it on me, man. Do it now so I
All
don't have
right.
to go to
Yes.
the post office
Yeah.
twice.
Well,
I know
we're
it's
just-
really. I was actually thinking about shutting down my sales because I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm sick of going to the post
Yeah.
office with this fucking pandemic and like, it's like I take in a few CDs and then a day later I get another
Yeah.
order. I'm like, fuck, man. So now I
Well,
gotta go
don't.
back again.
As far as mine, don't
And
stress
it's
it.
like it's.
Yeah.
Oh no. I mean, I
Yeah.
have another trip coming.
As a
up,
matter of
but-
fact, if you want to take your time and
Just like,
draw me
yeah,
like an
it's-
extra little thing in the corner, no, whatever, dude. I'm not in a hurry. I did it mainly just because, I really dig it. I dug the art.
Yeah, I'd probably end
Yeah.
up getting like the pre-order vinyl, so you'll have time.
Yeah, get the vinyl. Help support that.
Well, let's
'cause
talk
I'm
about
trying
that.
to,
Where can we get that shit? Just let everybody know. Put it out in blast before we hang up here. Let us know. Where can we get your shit?
Yeah, so you can get the CD or the poster or the digital download at Dungeon Weed Doom Sludge at bandcamp.com.
Nice.
And the album's going to be on Forbidden Place Records. That's also on Bandcamp.
Shout out
It's
to Tony
Forbidden
Willis.
Place Records. It's
KL
the first
Bergman.
pressing's out, sold out, but the picture disc I think is still available for pre-order.
Yes.
Yeah, you got the
Grab one of
splatter
those,
one
man.
and
Yeah. Shout out to Tony and Kale.
Yeah.
Forbidden Place. Yes. Good.
for sure. Good guys.
Yeah, man, those guys have been so great to work with. I'm really been happy with that. They're just whatever I suggest, they're up for it. They're like, hey, well, you want to do a cassette? I was like, yeah, let's do it. What if we included Dungeon Weed rolling paper? They're like, oh yeah, let's do it. I'm like, all right, well, what if we had a black light poster? They're like, oh yeah, yes, yeah. I was like, okay, right. This is, that's what you want in a record label is just some guys that are like stoked to be
Can I buy
making
rolling?
it happen.
Do you have rolling papers?
You'll see.
Okay. All
You'll see.
right. I see how you are.
Your first print sold out.
The first pressing of the album sold out. Yeah, that was the splatter disc. That hasn't even arrived yet, but the pre-orders are all sold out. And then the picture disc is they just kind of opened pre-orders for that a couple weeks ago. So I think that's
Get out
still
there and
available.
buy it. Even if you don't buy it, I mean, just at least listen to it, on streaming services or whatever. If you listen to the album, you'll buy it. I did. It's fucking amazeballs. I think it's great. Dmitri, thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely,
really
man. It's
appreciate
a
it.
pleasure.
Definitely. Thanks for
bet.
letting me spout. I've got plenty to say. When we come back to episode 2, we'll talk about Southeast Asian music.
Let's do that.
Oh man.
And more
Yeah, I'm
Rush
all about
because
that.
we're all big Rush fans. So we'll need to get into that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Well, everybody have a great night. You've been listening to Undetermined the podcast with Dmitri Mavra from Dungeon Weed.
Yeah.
Check out the album.
Dungeon Weed.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.